morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on preparing for the digital skills revolution. We're privileged to have two distinguished guests with us today who are experts in their respective fields and bringing wealth of knowledge and experience to this discussion. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Christelle Rain and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of HR Locker, and I'm delighted to have Professor Markus Helfert with us today. He is an accomplished academic and renowned expert in digital service innovation, and Markus currently holds the position of Professor in Digital Service Innovation at Maynooth University and serves as the Director of the Innovation Value Institute. With his extensive research in areas such as service innovation, smart cities, and IoT-based smart environments, Professor Helfert has authored over 200 academic articles and presented his work at international conferences. So we're delighted to have him share his insights on the evolving digital skills landscape today. Markus, that's a mouthful, so we're all expecting great things from you today. And our second guest speaker we have is Barry Prost. He is a highly respected professional in the recruitment industry and a co-founder of the multiple award-winning recruitment brands, including Propel Consult and Rent a Recruiter. With 20 years of industry experience, Barry has managed teams across the UK and Ireland, delivering recruitment solutions to clients in Ireland, Europe, and the Middle East. He is an expert in utilising tech-enabled and data-driven approaches to optimise the recruitment process. We are excited to hear Barry's practical insights on strategies for HR success in the digital age. So thank you so much, Barry, for being with us here today.
Thanks, Christelle.
So after those two grand entrances, what I suppose it will take a moment just to outline what we'll be covering in today's webinar. So the first kind of area we'll be looking at will be digital skills that are in high demand for 2023 and beyond. So we'll ask both Barry and Markus some questions around that area. The next kind of section we'll be looking at are the HR challenges and opportunities in acquiring and retaining talent. So, at the moment we kind of have two issues around that area. One, in terms of we're almost close to full employment. It's very difficult to acquire talent, and also that retention talent piece as well. Then the final category that we'll go into will be around the practical kind of, I suppose, HR strategies for continuous learning and upskilling. So focusing on both Barry's viewpoint in terms of hiring for skills and making sure that you're growing your workforce, that side of it, and then also having a good discussion with Markus in regards to upskilling and focusing on how you can actually bring your employees up and upskilling your employees. As always, I'd be delighted to have any questions and answers, so any questions from people. So we have the questions and answers section there that Jenny is monitoring. So throughout the discussion, if you have any questions, just pop them into the questions and answers section. If I don't answer them straight away, we'll for sure answer them at the end of the chat, but do as many questions as possible. As I've told the two guys that expect at least 15 questions each, so no pressure. No pressure at all. We do want them to come back, so please do ask as many questions as you feel free. And then after the webinar, we will send a copy of the slides and the actual presentation to anybody as well if they're not able to make the full recording as well. So if we dive into the first section, if we dive into the first section, I suppose, in focusing on, what are the digital skills in demand, or where do we see the trends? So if I kind of pose this question, first of all, to yourself, Barry, is if we look at the top digital skills that have been in demand so far in 2023, and I suppose what we should be looking at going forward as well.
Thanks, Christelle. Yeah, and hopefully I'll do my best to live up to that introduction, so no pressure. No pressure. But look, I think it's a great webinar to be involved with, and I think it's really topical and so important for businesses right now. So hopefully, we can share some kind of practical insights, to help businesses address these shortages. And these shortages are here, and they're on our doorstep, and they're coming. And I think if you look at the infograph, if we can share, I sent an infograph through just from the Leeds project, and the Leeds project is a digital it's a digital skills project, sort of EU-backed project responsible for identifying the future advanced digital skills demands across Europe. You will see that, very clearly there is some quite stark skill shortages there. And I think if we look at specifically, the top skills in demand, we can see that runs across, data analytics, AI app development, and AI implementation. And it shows us that there's going to be 20 million more ICT specialists needed by 2030 in Europe. And if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to have a shortfall of 10 million professionals if we don't address this now. And looking at even a specific subset of that, cybersecurity, we're going to have a shortfall of 1 million professionals if we don't do something about the skill shortage today. And then kind of more on a macro level, we can see the EU is lagging way behind, the likes of the US and China when it comes to digital skills. So we're in the digital decade now, in case you didn't know it. And we've also just the government and the EU have launched the Year of Skills in May 2023. So 90% of government services are going to be consumed online by 2030 in Ireland, and I think that's the target is up for 100% kind of across the EU. So certainly, we're here now, and kind of this is these are kind of the skills gaps that we need to address across the digital skills.
Yeah, and interestingly, Markus, we were at an event last week, was it, I think?
Yeah.
and one of the speakers spoke about that the focus at the moment from a government perspective is skills in terms of nurses, doctors, teachers, which obviously is extraordinarily important. But if we look at the demand for 2023 and beyond, we kind of have to marry that with the skills, for the digital skills that we're going to require as well. In your own experience, I suppose, if we're looking in terms of universities and skills I suppose what we're training people on, you kind of seeing the same trends as Barry, that's the skills that companies are looking for, that graduates are looking for.
Yeah, thanks, Christelle, and absolutely. It resonates very well what Barry and what all the statistics we really are hitting that big skill shortage in Europe, and particularly if we go along with the digital transformation. So you mentioned healthcare, nurses, doctors, but also like these job profiles will change, and also in all sectors we see that digital transformation. So we need a massive amount on digital skills. And one thing, like when we talk about digital skills, not all digital skills are the same. So we have certain digital skills where we actually really lead digital transformation. So Barry mentioned, for example, all the statistics talk about data science, AI, more technical skills, data skills around it. But I think in all job profiles, we need certain level of digital skills to really avail of the opportunities of digital transformation. So I think we need to rethink a little bit of job profiles, levels of digital skills, where do we need what, defining maybe that landscape around this. So, and then also I think what happens, and that we see that at the university level from the programs, the education programs, and also the demand from the employers is far more on interdisciplinarity. So that we basically have technical skills, maybe enriched with social science, business skills, and vice versa. So I think that these different typical domains, they get a bit more blurry, that we basically need to really know the different skills within that. So this interdisciplinarity, and that's in addition to kind of also creativity, problem solving skills, entrepreneurship at a certain level. So we need very creative problem solvers who understand at least some aspects on technology, but also the context, social science, business aspects as well. So that interdisciplinarity we really see as a very important one. And also ethics, particularly when we see the discussions on AI, ChatGPT, and possibilities on what technology can do. I think a certain level of ethical awareness and ethical responsibility in all job profiles is also important. So my main point is, so digital skills are not all the same. We need to look a little bit more diverse in different profiles, and that's probably one of the challenges at the moment on HR, recruitment, and actually really looking at these job profiles.
Marcus, that's actually a really interesting point in that, usually we look at, in terms of digital skills, we're thinking of the jobs that are digital, right? We're thinking of the actual developers, the people who are actually doing the digital side of things. But the truth is that every job will need to have an element of digital in it. Like even, you spoke about ChatGPT or AI, is that, they're not going to take over people's jobs, but you are going to be able to know how to use them. And that I think is the key. But if we look then, Barry, at that kind of point that Marcus was making in terms of that every job needs to have some sort of digital element to it, in terms of HR playing a critical role in making sure that their companies are resourced for the next 5 years, that they understand what skills are required, what kind of strategies should they be looking at in terms of that kind of talent management approach?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, for companies that haven't kind of adopted this kind of culture of learning and this idea of becoming this kind of learning organization, it's really important. I think it's very important to look at how they can build that into their organizations. And I think if we look at, I think some simple ways that can be done is simply around, rewarding learning in an organization, or even looking at, celebrating learning, and not just focusing on, I think there can be a tendency of focusing on the junior staff when it comes to upskilling, but looking at them, mentoring maybe for the more senior staff. And even looking at learning as a skill in itself, I think is a really interesting idea that we don't often think about. And it's very simply understanding that people learn differently. And I think, for example, if there could be, a pile of content dumped on someone's desk and you could say to them, right, read that over the next 2 weeks and, you'll be upskilled in X, Y, Z. Certainly that wouldn't be my way of learning. But very simply, some people might learn better through, reading, or other people might learn better by looking at a video or being mentored. So I think just understanding that and maybe considering that people learn differently in an organization is an interesting idea. And then finally, I'd say embrace kind of the online learning platforms. We've got these really comprehensive platforms at our fingertips around, Coursera, Udemy, LinkedIn, etc. And closer to home, we've got a government website. I do some work with the Regional Skills Forum, which I can talk about a bit about later on, and mentors work as well, the government-backed skills-based initiative. But ecollege.ie is a fantastic resource that has, gives companies and individuals access to free online courses. And again, we can put reference to these in the chat or in the presentation or in the deck that you're going to send out after, Christophe.
And actually, very interestingly, I think that I'd love to see the stats on the ecollege.ie, because I think it might be one of the most underutilized portals that employers probably don't know anything about.
Sure, certainly I only recently discovered it, and it's not easy to find, so it's certainly not promoted, but and that's something maybe we can touch on a bit later on. I mean, the vastness of the resources that we have at our disposal in Ireland. A lot of it either heavily subsidized or completely free, and it's just the ecosystem is just it's so challenging to navigate, and it's something I know that Simon Coveney is looking to address, but it's certainly like a massive obstacle in terms of engaging companies in upskilling and reskilling staff.
Yeah, I know, and you're dead right. I only found about the website because an employee had said it to me, and I was like, "Gosh, I'm in this space, and I didn't know it was here."
Yeah, sure.
But Marcus, I suppose just coming on to that point is, I think, Barry, what you said is so critical, that people learn differently, and that learning or upskilling is not just upskilling junior staff. It's everybody in the organization has to be continuously upskilled. None of us are ever experts, or unless we're upskilling, we're never going to remain that way. So Marcus, I suppose if we look in terms of the university side of things, is one of the areas that I think, and I've done a few of these, is a nice way for people to get learning and get skills, is that microcredit or those small courses. Because sometimes I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this, is sometimes companies are looking at, oh, if we go down the university route, I don't want to send somebody on a degree or a master's or, you know, postgrad. I really just want them to get the skills. But, you know, those micro creds or those small courses are a great option, I think, for companies.
Yes, and I think that's also like there's a lot of movement in the academic or education sector around to offer more flexible learning. But still, I would agree with Barry, the kind of mapping between the requirements and finding the courses, that's still a challenge. And the micro-credential movement in Ireland and across Europe and also in Maynooth University, I think is a really welcome one. So where we have short courses, for example, at the Innovation Value Institute, we're leading one micro-credential on leading digital transformation. It's a 6 weeks course, a practical-oriented course for professionals, so with online component, but also a practical element in. And so the participants, the successful participants, they get a certificate on the end, they get credits for this. So I think that's important. And in the long term, hopefully these micro-credentials, they can be stacked to maybe a degree, to an award. So that's at least somewhere the plan around this. But I think micro-credentials, because they're short, they're concise, they're focused on a particular topic, are extremely important for that lifelong, that upskilling and continuous education. And I think then with the mapping and road mapping, I think that's a challenge for HR, for career development plans, not only on the junior level, it's probably for all staff levels, to identify the right skills mix, the right portfolio of offerings, on education offerings, and Barry mentioned some online examples, but also the skill net. So I think there's a lot there. It needs to be rightly mapped. And maybe just one observation on this learning, the expectations have changed as well over the years. So on an undergraduate level, so the typical students as well, the younger generations, but also I think professionals on various levels. So basically the demand for the right courses for upskilling, I think that has changed as well. So particularly when we look at the competition and the shortage of skills, talents. So we need to be mindful that actually there are certain expectations from employees and that we have to cater, look after this, and offering these more flexible training courses with hopefully a certificate on the end, as the micro-credential shows.
Yeah, and I definitely think that real key is a lot of people who maybe later on in their career might find going and sitting in a classroom a little bit daunting because they haven't done it for 20 years. But Barry, to your point, is that there's so many different ways to learn. You know, you can do it online, you can do it through flexible learning. If you prefer a more practical approach, which I think a lot of the micro-credential courses really are good for that, that's a real practical approach. And that kind of gets over the nerves of people. And then some people who maybe have just kind of college up 2 years, they're just delighted, they're happy, they know how to learn, so they're happy just to be sent through. So there's just a huge vast array. But I think the mapping and the roadmap is really important from a HR perspective to, unfortunately, understand that it's not one size fits all, but to figure out that there's so many resources and which fits you guys which fits your company as a strategy. We're just going to go to the next section there. So really just focusing on those HR challenges, which I like to throw in the challenges, also lead to opportunities, just be a little bit positive. But really around the acquiring and retaining talent. And I think that, we've all alluded to, is we're at full employment. Finding skilled people is very challenging, I think, for almost every industry at the moment. But I suppose, Barry, if we come to you from a recruitment perspective, what are you seeing at the moment really in regards to the challenges, and I'm going to throw that opportunity word in there, that HR are currently facing in kind of retaining and acquiring talent?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think when you look at acquiring talent, I think it's this shift that we're seeing now towards kind of this idea of skills-based hiring. So really, it's looking at employers identifying candidates now based on the specific skills that they have, you know, rather than their education background or where they went to university. You know, not just Christelle hiring them because they went to Maynooth, great universities like Maynooth University, for example, but also looking, or even their prior work experience, because they, you know, often, you know, as recruiters, we see it a lot, you know, that clients want people from certain companies and or from certain universities. So it's that shift, I think, is going to be really challenging. But it looks like recruitment professionals are really up for that challenge. I think if you look at, LinkedIn's Future of Recruiting report, you'll see that 75% of recruiting professionals are now predicting kind of skills first hiring will be a priority for the company 2023 2024. So I think that's kind of probably both represents a challenge and an opportunity, because I think it will unlock and enable companies to access talent that perhaps would have been hidden from them in the past. I think when it comes to acquiring and retaining talent, that's the business that we're in Rent a Recruiter for our clients. We're that's what we do. That's our bread and butter on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's making sure that we actually we embed ourselves in companies. So we look at the entire kind of recruitment process and how companies go about kind of acquiring talent. And I think it's what's really powerful is looking at a company's culture and reputation online. And we have an audit that we're providing at the moment, or a health check, if you like, for companies, whereby we can look at how what their reputation is like online currently, and give them simple step-by-step kind of improvements of how they can shift that. And I think what the data shows is that SMEs really feel that their reputation and their brand, or lack of reputation and brand, really inhibits them in acquiring talent. So I think that will be kind of one opportunity as well for companies to look at.
Yeah, and I actually think, Barry, I would 100% agree with you that the likes of Glassdoor and any of the even your LinkedIn references,
sure,
there's such a huge importance on that now.
Yeah,
people when they're applying for jobs,
that's where they go. And and it's very surprising the amount of companies we talk to, and they're not even aware of what the narrative is about the company online. So, and it can be hugely damaging. But the good thing is there's some simple steps you can take to address that.
Yeah, exactly. The worst thing you can do is ignore it.
Exactly. Yeah, or not be aware of it. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly. But Markus, we were talking about this kind of a couple of days ago, just in regards to that kind of battle's probably a strong word, but to be looking at the hiring for skills, and then also just to be looking at, okay, well, has somebody come from Maynooth or UCD or DCU? That's who I want to hire. I want to hire that graduate because I think that course is the best. And it's just a tick the box exercise to know that it's a little bit of AI ChatGPT to say that I want a graduate from UCD and of this course because they're the ones who succeed. Do you still kind of see that in a lot from a recruitment side of things, Markus, or do you think we're kind of moving away from that and people are looking at people rather than just their CV in regards to the education they have?
Yeah, I would rephrase it a little bit. So we probably complement the traditional hiring process with certificates and background with maybe other skill-based interviews and information what we have. So we make a more comprehensive assessment, I think, of the candidates. So I still believe that some background, certificates, courses, reputation are important, and that's also when we talk with employers. Access to students, they come to certain universities, they want to talk to a certain cohort of students, and so I think that's still important. And also with the amount of applications, certificates are a certain level of assuring that certain skills have been reached and acquired. So I think that is still important. But I also think this kind of more comprehensive reviewing and interviewing and hiring process as an opportunity for smaller companies. So basically, they can look how the potential candidate fits to the organization. So, and I think that's also that kind of on the one side presenting the organization in a certain way, and that the culture, I think, is important, and the candidate. So it's again not all jobs are similar, same candidates looking for certain opportunities. So I think that map between organization candidate and organizational fit is important, and that more comprehensive interviewing recruitment process is an opportunity.
Markus, we're gonna touch on this later on, but I also just want to reiterate that we have worked closely as a company with a number of universities, and I have always found in my own experience that universities are really happy to talk to you, really happy to understand what skills you're actually looking for, happy to align you to, if it's a master's students or MBA students who are doing research or anything like that, and also who are looking for placements afterwards, and to explain the kind of skills that you're looking for. I have found the universities are in my experience have been, they want to talk to you. They want to know what you're looking for. So I suppose if we just look at that, from a HR leader perspective, or anybody, even in a small business, if you're a CEO or just trying to grow your team, how do you kind of really focus on that your even the grads that you're hiring, that they have the skills that you require going forward? Is it just a case of is it just the interview process to say, okay, well, they've done the degree in whatever it is, I'm presuming they have the skills, or should you be looking actually at what the course entailed, even maybe doing an entrance exam or anything like that, or not an entrance exam, but so a course-based, a skill-based kind of test beforehand? Or do you think companies, I suppose, what should they be including in that interview stage to kind of really ascertain what skills from a graduate level people have?
Exactly, and it's basically also the question how far and how time consuming, how much effort companies didn't. But I think with that skill shortage and finding the right talent, so I think the effort even upfront, maybe talking to the universities, understanding more the course, and for example the placement, the internships, particularly on the undergraduate level, are a fantastic way to understand what the students are able to do, what the skill set in that particular course is. So I think that engagement between companies, universities, and universities are open, I think, to this, and engaging in various levels. So placements are one. For example, also when we develop curriculums, we invite the industry to advise on skills. So we have that dialogue between non-academic sector, so industry, also public sector, and the academic world, the learning world. I think that this is important, and that's an opportunity. So yes, I would invite companies to talk with universities, like course leaders, programs around this. And I think that helps also one of the other challenges. So I think we need to be far faster, more responsive to the needs and understanding the needs on both sides. So this kind of flexibility, responsiveness, I think when we talk that dialogue about skills, curricula, programs, I think helps and speeds up the process of offering the right courses.
Definitely agree. Barry, from a recruitment perspective, we just really focus on a recruitment.
Yeah, well, just to come in, I mean, just on that point, I mean, I'd also second that. I think when you talk to universities, when we engage with universities, we find them incredibly responsive and willing to be open. At the same time, I defer to Markus on this one, but I don't know if we want to, turn our universities into kind of factories where we create kind of drones that go into Microsoft or the other kind of large employers in Ireland. But at this, what I would say is that we do, from an employer's perspective, and from talking to employers, I think what we really, we need to adopt as a country kind of more the idea of apprenticeships, and this idea of earning and learning, and traditionally, for whatever reasons, perception and perhaps a little bit of snobbery, Ireland has been really poor in terms of its uptake of apprenticeships. I think if you look at the data around, Germany compared to Ireland, for example, I think 60% of graduates come from apprenticeships, so something like 15% in Ireland. Because, it's not perceived as the same quality as perhaps a traditional third level education. But I think from an employer's perspective, what we'd love to see is, graduates with some work experience. So, and I think that's probably kind of, I think that's critical, and that we maybe change the culture and change the perception around apprenticeships. And I think that is something that there's, that there's a big push on in terms of our national skills strategy, which has just been launched as well.
Yeah, and actually, Barry, I would 100% advocate for that in terms of, we're, and I hate to use the word overeducated, but I don't know what the percentage is in terms of leaving cert students going into third level education, but I wonder, would a lot of those kids kind of be better off going into some kind of apprenticeship? And it doesn't have to be looking, apprenticeships can also be in professional services as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those kind of apprenticeships, I think, are I think is really what we should be
Yeah,
reflecting.
and again, for companies again on the call, I think maybe we can put this link in as well, but I think it's Apprenticeships Ireland. I think there's 60, 70 apprenticeships available for companies, and that's going to increase.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting space to watch. I know they've done a lot in the UK at it, but I do think we are behind on that.
Sure. Yeah.
So if we just go into the third, actually, I just have one question here that I'm just going to pop on before we go into this section. Before I suppose I might pose it to Barry, but Mark is happy to have your input on it as well. Is how can you make sure that your recruitment process is fair and inclusive for people from different backgrounds and experiences? So I suppose if you're focusing on skills, but how do you make sure that it's I suppose from your D&I perspective that you're fair and equitable in terms of different backgrounds and experiences?
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's a really kind of it's a very relevant topic. I think what we're seeing this year is companies investing more in terms of their diversity and inclusion and their reputation. So it's certainly very topical. I mean, there's probably a number of very simple things you can do to make sure it's inclusive, and it's something maybe we can put up on a link online, but certainly we can simple things like making sure that your names are removed, making sure that ages are removed from your applications, gender, etc. Isn't referenced. So very, very simple things a company can do, and it's within its applicant tracking system, to ensure that that there's no bias across a couple of the key areas, so and then making sure that your interview processes are accessible, to both abled and disabled candidates. So in terms of there's a number of simple changes companies can make, whether it's from the application process or certainly the interview process as well.
Yeah, and we actually recently did a webinar and podcast with Christabel Feeney from Employers for Change. That,
yeah,
Jenny, if you get a chance, you might just put a link there. They do, and this is another area that I feel that sometimes isn't promoted enough. They do so much free training for companies. We've done a lot of internal training in regards to promoting diversity and inclusion, and really, really just simple things just around the language, even making sure that your careers page is accessible. It doesn't just start after you hire the person. It starts from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've actually got a podcast coming up on the talent, our podcast, The Talent Fix, which is coming up in August on that very point, DE&I in recruitment. So certainly very topical.
Yeah, and Markus, I'm not going to put you under pressure at the moment, but I do think, and I hope you're going to say that I'm wrong in my assumption, I would presume that universities are extremely inclusive. And I wonder what, in terms of if we look at a final year of undergraduate or postgraduate, which is full of diversity and inclusion, are we seeing that diversity and inclusion being embraced after in terms of interview stage? And I don't think we are, unfortunately. I think the universities are probably ahead of us.
Yeah, I think the public sector, so we have that incorporated into our hiring recruitment process, and particularly also when we have funded projects, European projects, key criteria, inclusion and diversity. And I think what needs to change is seeing not inclusion, diversity and regulations as a regulation, as a thing we have to do. It's actually an opportunity, because actually when we think about, and again, that skill shortage and creativity, these creative people, entrepreneurial people, we need the diversity. We need all the different aspects in this. So I think if recruitment and diversity inclusion is seen as an opportunity to do this, that it becomes completely natural, and then we have a big step done on actually having the right kind of skill sets within the companies, within the organizations as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and actually, when I was interviewing Christabel, she said a great thing. She was like, if you're looking for somebody who has huge initiative and somebody with huge drive, look at a person who has a disability, that they've had to go through so much to get to where they are. They've had to navigate a system that doesn't support them. They've had to be so determined to get through everything. So if they land, with you through an interview, they're bringing so much diversity with them, so much talent with them, and it's definitely something. It's an untapped skill shortage. That's different.
Yeah, sure.
It's spend another half an hour.
Just to point, Chriselle, companies or anyone who's interested on that point to the Irish Centre for Diversity, which is they work in partnership with companies and to help them kind of embed D&I in everything they do. So I'd certainly recommend any companies looking for more information on how they can incorporate D&I in their recruitment process to look them up and check and reach out to them. They're happy to engage with companies.
Brilliant. And I do think it's not an expensive process. People should just start looking at it and taking the first step. One more question before I go on to the next slide, and I think this is Markus, really aimed at yourself, is are you seeing more people signing up for short form courses rather than 4-year degrees? What's your opinion on them as opposed to full-time degrees?
Both, I think so. And that brings also what Barry mentioned before, a point kind of that we don't become like the really just the application and the skills provider for companies. So I think it's the mix on that. So we need certain foundational skills. So we need a good solid degree as well. So that's basically typically the undergraduate degree, at least the first 2 years, maybe 3 and 4, certain elements on this as well. And then I think where we have that solid foundation, then basically a mix in professional education and for shorter, more focused, more flexible courses as well. So I think we have both, and we need to tailor that and think about a lifelong career development, lifelong learning. I think that's the key to this, and then fitting the various skill sets together for the organization. So it's a very complex topic, and I'm glad, and thanks, Christelle, for the invitation for this webinar. So I think it's really timely because the digital decade goes already like in the last phase. So also all the skill shortages are highlighted. So we really need to do something. And also in Ireland as a country, I think if we really fit that, and if we get the different types of degrees, and apprenticeship is one form of education. So if we really look at all of the diversity in education systems, modes, courses, I think we can achieve something really good.
Yes, and Markus, I'm not going to steal this from you, but how many hours and days did you say until the end of 2027 the last time?
That's about 40,000 hours. So yes,
so
roughly.
It's not too far away.
Exactly.
It's not too far away. Yeah. It's not in the distant future that we can't ignore it. Which really, I suppose, brings me back to the strategies and the continuous learning is I think, and to the point I stole from you, Markus, is that in terms of we're in this digital decade at the moment, and as a software company, I'm always surprised at some companies that just aren't digitalized, or they haven't gone through that digital transformation, whatever that means. But if we're looking at the future skills that are required for the next, we're in the middle of 2023, so for the next 3.5 years, we need, as HR professionals, we have to be putting in our strategies now to make sure that we're not left behind. And it's I think that the only way that you can do that is really just focus on to look at your jobs and focus on what skills are required, and pivot if as needed, because I presume nobody thought that ChatGPT would be the number one thing that people are looking for this year. So if we bring that down, Barry, to focus on, I suppose, from a HR implementation, or I think the only way to get those skills is through fostering that culture of learning and upskilling and really continuous learning, that your job isn't just going to be the same as it is today in 10 years time. How can HR kind of really foster that culture of continuous learning to make sure that they're not left behind?
Yeah.
$1 million question, Barry.
No, it's a really good question, and to be honest, you've kind of answered it, Chriselle, as well. In some way. But I mean, it's really important, to have a this idea to build kind of skills mapping into the business, so understanding, because it's very hard to know and a skills audit, very hard to know what skills you need if you don't know what skills you have. And it's and again, there's some really interesting kind of tools and supports that companies can use, to kind of to help them with this. I know Enterprise Ireland have Spotlight on Skills. I think their next one's running in August. And that really helps companies look inside the business and then also help them plan for the future. But you're right. I mean, what you said there, how do you know, things are changing so rapidly. It's very hard to know what skills you're going to need. But I think if you have a company that's nimble and agile, and you have this, this attitude towards continuous learning, I think that's probably the most important thing, to have this kind of culture of continuous learning and rewarding it, and making sure it's a priority for, everyone. And it's kind of from the top down as well, that it's kind of rewarded and celebrated, when it comes to education and lifelong learning. So and obviously then this the kind of the key thing is it has to be invested in as well. So it has to be a kind of a priority for businesses, and they need to put their money where their mouth is. So I mean, they'd be kind of the key things, I'd say, around building this culture of continuous learning, and then investing in it as well. And just a final kind of support as well as mentor. I'm on the board of Mentors Work, which is a government-backed skills-based initiative, and they have do kind of skills assessments, if you like, for businesses. Again, it's completely free, but they will look at, when it comes to digital skills and automation, they will look at the competencies around implementation of smart automation, looking at companies' industry awareness, their awareness and adoption of emerging technologies, looking at digital tools to grow your business, impact on technology on customers, looking at SME best practice when it comes to digital space, and then kind of finally kind of technology for smart working. And that's all completely free. And then they that's something that you can do online at mentorswork.ie. And certainly, again, just speaking from a personal perspective, from our business, we describe ourselves as kind of tech enabled, and really, I think for companies, well, in most spaces, I mean, that's really kind of where you need to be going in order to stay competitive. But talking to people who work in our organization, they can't believe how they did their job before, they adopted these tools, which is really kind of pleasing to hear, because technology is kind of constantly transforming kind of the efficiencies and how we can deliver value for our clients.
And Markus, just when we talk about, it's one of the buzzwords in terms of digital transformation, I think a lot of companies think that that's really just for the software or tech companies, but do you see that, or like, I mean, I think digital transformation is so important for every single company now, no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah.
Do you see that yourself, Markus, with people who even are doing the courses with you?
Definitely agree. Like in all companies, I think digital transformation, digital skills are important. And just to kind of the aspect what Barry mentioned on skills mapping, I think that's important. And if it's aligned with the digital strategy of the company, and I would say any company should think about a digitalization strategy around this, so that basically the skills profiles, the descriptions, the mapping fits to the digital strategy, the ambition from the company over the next years, to really position that well. And I think that's also, like in Ireland at least, I think we have a fantastic support where you mentioned the skills mapping audit, but also, for example, when we develop at the Innovation Value Institute roadmap digital strategies, for example, with the support of the Innovation Voucher Program from Enterprise Ireland, which helps really. So typically we start maybe with we want to do something in AI, we want to do something, but then actually all the different aspects, actually, it's not the technical solution necessarily, it's the skills, the cultural change, the road mapping really around this. And I think if we do that in a larger scale for the organizations, with the organizations think about digital skills, digital strategy, and then the job profiles, the skills profiles, I think in this, that's aligned, that's a fantastic opportunity, and that's what's necessary.
Yeah, and I'm going to just kind of, I suppose this falls nicely into my next question, and also a question that I've gotten from somebody here, and I'm going to go to you first, Markus, in terms of, Barry, you've mentioned a number of different organizations that companies should be looking at. I managed a SkillNet for 6 years or so, and I still cannot get over how many companies don't realize how much support there is for them, how many free courses there are, how much funding there is available. This is not something that I always say to companies, you should never be paying full price for a course. There is always funding available, always. And there's so many different resources. But Markus, we touched on this briefly from how easy is it for a company, even a small SME of 20, 30, 40 people, to create a partnership with educational institutes? Should companies be looking at that as something to kind of, even if it's bringing in grads or kind of figuring out what skills are required?
Yeah, I think the universities in particular, also like the research institute, like the Innovation Valley Institute, we are open for the discussion. And I think it's the first step. So it's kind of establishing the contacting, for example, a program chair of a particular course in the university, so in a business school, computer science, or all the other department, or contacting a research institute like us. And then we usually have the first conversation, understanding kind of the problem, the challenges, and then trying also to suggest, for example, the innovation voucher program, but other SkillNet or other offerings around this. So I think that's also something which often companies don't tap into, that expertise what the higher education sector, the research institutes have. That is in our part. So, and we know where to go and where we can direct. So I think the first step is really to start a conversation and then seeing the right offering around this. So yeah, and like just in the Innovation Valley Institute, we are happy to discuss around digital transformation.
I'll put your email address, direct phone number in the Markus, don't worry. but Barry, you mentioned a couple of them, and I'm going to, the question that was here basically is where can companies get more information on courses, and can companies get funded? So Barry, I can list off a whole load of them, but if you want to start off with there's a number of resources for companies.
Sure. There are lots, and I absolutely second what you're saying about the amount of support that is available. I think the real challenge for Ireland is creating a much simpler system for employers to navigate, and I think that work is in process at the moment. But I'd just point to two that I'm involved in is Mentors Work, mentorswork.ie, which is run by IBEC and the Small Firms Association, and is a kind of a 12-week support program for SMEs to upskill them across, digital skills, management, etc., finance, marketing, etc. And then also I'd recommend companies reach out to their regional skills forum. There's one in each region in the country. And they can check that out at regionalskills.ie as well. And the mission of the Regional Skills Forum is really to make sure to conduct that important piece, which is matching kind of businesses to the relevant education training providers. So it's a really important role that they play kind of in that relationship.
Yeah, and I would also then, just in terms of seconding the SkillNet side of things, is that there's probably about 65 different SkillNets around Ireland at the moment that either will fund a program for you to send your employees on, if it's through, I don't know about the Maynooth ones, but size of UCD Professional Academy, I know that they sponsor some of those there. And as well as that, I suppose the concept behind the SkillNet side of things is that you sit down with the employer and figure out what training you need, what do your training needs analysis, figure out what training you need over the next 12 to 24 months. So there is a lot of supports there, but I would also really agree with you, Barry, is that it's a minefield, because they're not, it's not a one website.
Absolutely, I know, and it needs to be, so exactly. Hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, so there's a number of questions here, so I'm just going to, we'll do a quick fire round. So if I go over to yourself, Barry, we're struggling with attracting digitally skilled candidates at the moment. Who can I contact for employer branding health audits? Oh, I think you said that earlier.
Yeah, so Barry, I will. We're happy to have a conversation maybe offline on that. But sorry, is the question around employer branding audits, is it? Yeah. So I mean, we can. I can. Just contact. I'll drop a link in for where you know, I think do we have a link, Christelle, that you're going to share actually?
Yeah, I'll get you in to drop it in there.
Yeah, and we're going to we've actually just got you know, the trends that we're seeing, top 6 trends in recruitment that we're seeing as well. So there's a piece of content for if anyone wants to download it, that we can drop into the chat as well. Yeah.
And then Markus, this is kind of a very broad question, but can you give me an example of what you mean by digital skills?
Okay, as I mentioned on the beginning of the webinar, so digital skills are quite different, diverse. So, for example, it could be something like on digital literacy, knowing about tools, techniques, but also when we then look at digital profiles, positions, then we're looking at technical skills, for example, to really analyze data, knowing about the techniques on data science. So I can't answer this kind of with one particular area because they are quite diverse, but it could be techniques, tools, starting from simple technical tools, but also then more data science and even programming on that. And these are all in the software industry. These are digital jobs, digital profiles with specific skills on programming as well.
Yeah. And then I suppose I'll pose this for both of you is how can I reassure older employees they won't get left behind through this digital revolution? I think that's the same question that's been asked since the Industrial Revolution. So I suppose Barry, well, either Barry or Markus. Yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, it's a, you know, I'm kind of getting old. I'm certainly perceived as old in my company anyway, Christelle, so I can relate to that. But I'm worried about being left behind as well. But I think, look, there's never been as good a time to be old in that context, in my opinion, anyway, because the amount of kind of resources that are at our disposal in terms of upskilling and reskilling, and I mean, this is being driven from an EU and government level. So I would just recommend that person to make sure that they research and reach out, you know, in terms of to see what's available around reskilling and upskilling. I think they'd be pleasantly surprised about the amount that is available and how accessible it is, even though it might be really hard to find. But again, happy to have a chat with that person offline as well.
And I think communication is so key. But and Markus, I think finding if you are upskilling people, it is a case of finding the right course for people, not just throwing somebody in a 3-year degree if they haven't been to college in 30 years, basically, giving them that reassurance.
Yeah, and if you think about that, I would say all companies engage somewhere on a digital transformation journey. So we need the digital skills, these opportunities, and the diversity, and also diversity in age profiles. I think this is an opportunity, and we mentioned a few times the digital skills gap. So I think we need everyone on this, and so mapped together with the right courses, right learning, career path. I think that's an opportunity for any age group.
Yes, and I think that sometimes what is often left off in terms of DE&I and inclusion is that age gap, as well as that, you know, everybody, we can't just leave one age group out as well. We need that diversity from all ages. That's my lecture done for that moment. Thank you so much, guys. We're kind of finished the questions and it's almost 12 o'clock, so I'm just a bit conscious of time, but I really enjoyed speaking to you both, and I could definitely spend another hour chatting on the topics. So I know, Jenny, you're going to send everything out, and Barry and Markus's contact details are here. I know you're both on LinkedIn as well, if anybody wants to reach out that way. But I really do appreciate your time so much, and hopefully we get to chat again soon, because I definitely could have spent another hour on some of those topics. So really do appreciate it. And again, if anybody has any specific questions for Barry and Markus, please do reach out. I'm happy to take questions as well if anybody wants to give me one. And as always, Jenny will send out a copy of the recording with the links that we've put in there as well. And I know, Barry, you put in a couple of links there as well. So thank you, everybody, so much. And we hope to talk to you all soon. Take care.